Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. First hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we've talked about this in the past, but it's usually worth coming back to as we start thinking about traveling is logistics. How do we get things in and out? What are carnets? How do they work? How do we deal with trucks? How do we deal with planes? So we're going to talk all about that in the second hour. The rest of the week, we've got, of course, education. We don't put that on YouTube from 8 to 10 tomorrow morning. But 10 o'clock, we're going to talk a little bit about live video inside of Keynote. And we're going to show some examples of that. Some really good examples. It should be really interesting about how people are using live video inside of Keynote. So we're going to do that at 10 o'clock tomorrow. And then we'll have general discussion on Sunday. So stay tuned for all of that. And now we'll jump into the questions. Bill, what do we have?
Our first one comes from Todd Rains in Allen, Texas. And Todd says, is there any way to determine the Zoom traffic congestion by day and time of day? I'm wondering if certain days and times are better than others for planning meetings specifically.
Go ahead, Rupert.
There shouldn't be any noticeable problem here. I don't think if you're seeing some kind of problem or you suspect something, there's probably some maybe issue on your route to Zoom. You know, if there were predictable problems. If there were predictable problems on Zoom's network, they would be addressing that. So if you're on an enterprise account, you can log into your Zoom analytics dashboard on the back end. You'll get some graphs there of the performance of the meetings that you have had in progress. If you have like a Unify network, I would log in locally. I'd log in there to see your network performance. I'm just trying to think what could be causing things that like this you're experiencing. If you're on a large campus, you may have a congestion issue where you have lots of users trying to connect to Zoom locally from your facility or for your location. So I'd like to know a little bit more, but I don't think there's going to be anything predictably at Zoom's end that's going to show you a problem, because if there was, they'd be addressing it. You can also check their status page, status.zoom.us, for scheduled maintenance. But again, if there's anything causing problems at their end, it would be pretty well addressed, I believe.
And go ahead, John.
Yeah, so I think about this as like with work from home. Everybody's kind of working from home right now, at least across the U.S. And what I've seen is like 3 o'clock when all the buses kind of get out and all the kids get on YouTube. Poor performance of networks and congestion on whether DSL or their cable lines that they're using.
Yeah, one of the things to look at is what your what service provider you're using, whether they have a reputation for being oversubscribed for each server. So you may have something that tests really well in the middle of the night, but a good example is Spectrum is a good example of a company that oversubscribes their POPs. And so what ends up happening is that you at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 10 o'clock in the morning or certain times of the day, it's almost unusable. And the rest of the time it tests fine. So you do have to kind of pay attention to it. And one thing you can do is do regular speed tests across the time and just see what you're getting in those speed tests. Just make sure that you're speed testing something outside of your service provider. So don't let Comcast test to another Comcast node. You want to test to something across the country to get a sense of what it looks like. We do that a lot of times when we're on site. We'll do that all day, like once an hour, just to kind of see what's happening, just get a rough graph of what's there. And you can automate. There are tools that will automate that. We just haven't done that. Next question.
Rupert McRae, who was just asking that, the first question says, who might be an ideal hardware manufacturer to make a Zoom appliance equivalent to the SkypeTX box?
I mean, the obvious answer is Supermicro. It's going to be the one that's going to build the box that most people use when they do some version of this. Would be Supermicro. The problem is for Zoom ISO, it would have to be Mac based at the moment. So there's not a PC solution, I think, at the moment for the ISO output. Now, it's really not. It's less about the hardware and more about the software. What SkypeTX does is actually a lot more than just put Skype on an SDI box. They're doing routing, caller management, talkback systems, and so a lot of what makes the SkypeTX box a SkypeTX box is all of the somewhat cobbled together set of services that use Skype as a transport system. So I think that what you really want to look at is who, a couple of weeks ago I would have said Liminal to design that process, but hopefully we'll see something, from either Zoom or a close partner to build that. But I do think that that is one of the things that's kept Zoom a little outside of the market. I don't think everyone's excited about Skype, but a lot of broadcasters already have a box that's built, into their system with SDI and everything else that it needs. It's really hard to give that up once it's working. So you do have to have an SDI, I think an SDI solution to make that work. Next question.
Todd Raines is right back with another one from Allen, Texas. He says, any advice on integrating Unity Intercom with a vMix session and how to route the mix from Zoom via virtual audio cables and Unity separately?
Well, I don't know if I would try to connect Unity to vMix. I think it's just, I'm doing a show and I have Unity. So I think that, and there's two ways to do that. Of course, you have a server that you can put on locally, or you can have a local server that's managing Unity and people can access it. Another way to do that is to put it on the cloud, so you can have the Unity server on the cloud and then people are able to connect to it from there. And so that would be and then the main thing is that if, as far as a mix from Zoom and Unity, that's probably something you're going to do in routing in your home computer. So you can have the return coming in from Zoom and return from Unity, and you need to mix it. On a Mac, you would use something like a loopback. Can grab both of those outputs and mix them together and give them back to you as a single unit. In fact, you can pan them one way or the other. On the PC, I think you'd use the potato, banana, pineapple thing to do the routing, I believe. So that'd be another way to kind of match that. But it's a little bit more managing those on the edge and then figuring out where you're going to put that Unity server. Next question.
Next one comes to us from James Hutchinson in Dublin, Ireland. He said, what makes a Nanlite Pavotube 6C better than the Logitech Litra Glow and its ilk? Or are they just the same, just in a different form factor?
I find them to be a lot. I have the Pavotubes and I have a lot of little box lights that are similar to the Logitech Litra. And I find that it is the form factor. I use two of them together, so I'm not using one of them, but the form factor of having something all the way across, I think, gives a much wider light, process. And so I think that using two of them, using one of them, it's still like it's a wider point of view. Now, what I haven't built for mine yet, that it's in my head, and someday I might get to, is building like a big diffuser for each one of them, because they're bright enough that if I put like a semicircle across that front edge, I think I could get a much larger source. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just going to say, when I was learning lighting, there was a guy, Bill Holshelnikov, who had a book, and I think it was called Placing Shadows or something like that. When you're dealing with lighting for an image that's going to be broadcast, the kind of shadows that the light casts are pretty critical to how somebody looks. Particularly soft lights, big soft lights, are prized because they cast really soft shadows, and even with little things like skin imperfections, instead of a hard, like you'd see on the moon, like a crater of the moon kind of defined shadow, it spread things out and makes skin look better, makes people look better. So if you only have small lights, putting a couple of them up so that one fills in the natural shadows caused by the other one is a good idea. So those Pavotubes, as Alex says, putting up a couple of them means you're going to get relatively soft light because they're spread out along an axis, and they're going to be coming from two different directions, and that's going to end up being more flattering to somebody who doesn't have perfect skin than a point source.
And what I typically travel with is four. They pack in together because they have little magnets, and so you just pop a collection of four of them together. And I use two for the background and two for the foreground, and it seems to work pretty well. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas is up next. He says, how can office hours function better as an accelerator and a mentoring hub?
Go ahead, Tony.
So there are a couple of things that jump right out for me. So one thing would be that we use the after hours as, first of all, we use the after hours as a Carmi method, in that we make sure that we embrace new people that come into the room and we fully accept them into the community as they are coming. The other thing would be that all of the office hour shows that are being broadcasted create more opportunity for people and participate with those programs. Those are a variety of different methods to do the same thing. And when you perfect, an example would be this Wednesday, Bryant Shan will be on Conversation with Tony Mobley. Bryant Shan is relatively new to the community, but he has participated in every single show that is on office hours. And so there are a variety of different ways that are already in place for you to learn and to be mentored.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot that we're doing. I think there's a lot we can always do more of. I mean, I think that some of the after hours breakouts that we're now doing, I think we're going to see more and more of those happening. A lot of this is just gauging how it affects the general room. I always want to kind of have a water cooler area that people can just sit there and talk about issues and not feel like they get there and there's now an hour of something that they didn't care about. So that's the thing that I'm most sensitive to. So we've now started to push those into breakout rooms. And a lot of this is organic. We're trying to figure it out, but you're going to see us doing more and more in breakout rooms. The other side of that is I don't want to pull too much energy out of the main room. So there's this whole like balancing of trying to maintain, everybody's energy, that we're kind of stepping through in that area. The biggest thing is getting more organized around, the volunteering process, which is on me, and something I'll actually be finally able to work on over the weekend. The bid that I thought would never end has been submitted. So now I can, and I'm going to spend this weekend kind of working through some stuff with Ken to get some stuff up. And so we're going to try to give people more opportunities, both on the Mobley process, the Belfast method, all of the things that we're doing, Office Hours 2.0, to have places to actually take part in it. And then hopefully that generates more conversation. Next question.
Joseph in San Diego says, how can we treat a room to reduce echo without using those specialized foams? I have a home office and echo is a problem.
Go, Jeffrey.
Clutter. Simple as that. The more that you clutter a room,
as long
as you have your boxes so they don't encroach into your frame, they can be hanging up and down. But literally, it's just doing that, putting couches down, putting rugs down, going to the craft store. I always love doing this. I go to the craft store. These are usually like $3 a panel. These are canvas prints, and I just painted them. You can go to paint night and do different designs, put them up on the wall. Go to Goodwill, you'll be able to get paintings if you're not a painter, and just fill your walls with decoration that doesn't bounce. If it bounces like glass and things like that, then you want to stay away from it. But anything that has any type of fabric, you should be able to reduce any sounds. And the biggest thing is, of course, the corners, and that's where couches and chairs really come in.
You go ahead, Mitchell.
I like the fabric on the walls. I usually start out by using this nice patterned material that also just happens to be a good receptacle for foam and other things like that, and it just cuts down the reverb time. And as Jeffrey was saying, yeah, a lot of clutter in the room tends to break down the echoes quite a bit. So I've got lots of clutter, lots of things on the wall, and I don't really need to fine tune it much further in order to get the echo down. I think you'll find it. You'll be okay.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, clutter, irregular surfaces, and soft furnishing. So I've got a couch over here in the corner. I think that helps a little bit. I don't talk straight onto the wall. I'm turned to an angle, and I'm talking into a corner of shelves behind which I have hung moving blankets. So I'm in a little bit of a acoustic corner here, and I've just got plenty of stuff back there.
Courtney?
Yeah, do what Rupert does. Have a lot of stuff on the walls to break up the flat surfaces, and echo comes from standing waves. It's the most objectionable type of echo, which is parallel surfaces that are perfectly parallel and reflective. So if you have a 50-inch monitor on a wall, mount it at an angle just a few degrees down, and that will change the angle of reflection so it won't generate standing waves that ping pong back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and increase the decay time. And carpet and drapes, of course, help absorb a lot of sound. And be careful if you're putting foam. Find some foam to put on the walls that is not designed for doing that, because It has to be fire retardant because a lot of the urethane foams, if they do catch on fire, will generate toxic fumes that will kill you very quickly. So you have to be very careful about fireproofing and get only wall coverings that are proved to be non-toxic if they do catch fire.
Bill.
You've gotten most of it. The only other thing I wanted to add is, remember, we're talking really about reverb in a small space as opposed to echo itself. And I just will note that in the case of real echo, let's say you're standing in a canyon, you yell. If you listen carefully, what's coming back isn't in your voice perfectly. It's losing a lot of the top end. Echo can be frequency dependent. So in some cases, you'll have a room, and because of its dimensions, will emphasize certain bass notes, but nothing else. It also can make splashy certain high sounds and nothing else. So if you eventually want to really attack it and get out of there, you probably should look at the waves that are being generated and see if there's anything that room in its dimensions are unusually emphasizing, and see if you can notch that out.
My room has got mostly moving blankets. So just a lot of moving blankets. It was very, very roomy before I put the moving blankets up. And so there's some right in front of me. There's some on either side above me. Carpets are a must, in my opinion. Like, you just have to you can just get all kinds of, you don't have to make it wall to wall, but you should throw down carpets and something over top of you. A lot of people forget that there's stuff bouncing back down on them. So curtains are another thing that can make a big difference if you're trying to have something that looks like it. The more fullness, 100% fullness means you're using basically twice as much curtain as you need for the space. So that's where we get all the wrinkles in the curtain. But pulling that together to have a lot of fullness will absorb a lot of that reverberation. And then those are some of the big things that you can do to make that work. I've had friends that built big boxes out of 2x4s and then just literally filled them with towels, and not something that I would suggest from a fire perspective, but they filled them like these big giant ones, and they painted on the front of them, and they put them on the walls of their room, and it sucked up everything, so it doesn't have to be expensive to make that work, and you can even make them look nice. Next question.
Comes from Todd Rains in Allen, Texas in the U.S. here, and it says, is there a way to assign and use keyboard shortcuts for Unity Intercom clients on a PC laptop?
I believe that there's a Unity, there is a Unity plugins for, now I'm coming from a Mac perspective, but there's a Unity library for the Stream Deck. So I think that is the, you're doing keyboard shortcuts. Keyboard shortcuts. The only way that I know how to do that, the only way we've done that in the past is with a Stream Deck. And so with the Stream Deck, there's a Stream Deck library, and then you drag all the stuff that you want from Unity, all the things you want to talk about, into the Stream Deck. And I have to admit that I have never tried to do it inside of, I don't know if there's a keyboard library, but what everybody that I know that uses Unity on a desktop has is a Stream Deck. so I've literally never seen anybody use it without it in any kind of serious way. So I would highly recommend taking a look at that. Next question.
George Butters in Halifax, Nova Scotia is up next. He says, what critical pieces of equipment are in short supply?
Go ahead, John.
I'm seeing a lot with monitors, CPU, DSPs, when I'm purchasing, also like a lot of server grade hardware, plus anything that uses an APIC. Just having a lot of issues getting networking gear, 6 to 9 month lead times.
Yeah, go ahead, Rupert.
I still cannot get all the parts I require for my IKEA IVAR shelving.
How does IKEA, it's not like how are they not having enough stuff? I mean, you'd think that this would be the one company that would figure this out, but evidently, yeah, IKEA is way backed up. I mean, there's so many shelving things and other things that I wanted to get at IKEA that I have to admit that at the very beginning of this, or the middle of the pandemic, I thought I was going to get everything from IKEA, like this would work. And the backups were so bad that I just stopped considering IKEA as an option. Like, I just don't even go there anymore because I'm just like, I got to figure this out some other way. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Anything that uses a DAC is in short supply. And other than that, bacon.
Bacon. There's plenty of bacon in California, just in case you're wondering. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I was going to say chicken wings, but the other thing is there's a lot of electronics that are using up their old stock. So keep in mind, if you're buying anything new, there's always a chance that you might have something that has older technology in it. And so it's a good time to actually just buy when you absolutely need it, and then go from there. Other than that, I have a hard time getting cab drivers, and Uber drivers, and any type of transportation. You gotta put a couple that pad your times for a few hours, just in case.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. How would you use qlab and a Stream Deck to insert clips into a Zoom meeting? Can someone actually demo this?
I don't think we can demo it in this amount of time. It's hard. It's a hard thing to answer that quickly, or to come up with a demo of it to show you. But I think that, maybe Tony's going to show us. I don't know if Tony's joining us now. Oh, there we go. The Stream Deck, I think, is kind of an extraneous to it. I mean, of course, you can have Stream Deck control those things, but the main thing is where you get qlab, and what you need to be able to do is be able to have. If you want to insert something relatively seamlessly, you have to have something that's going to activate both qlab as well as the ATEM at the same time, or whatever you're switching to. So something has to be able to talk to that. So that can be something that is done in Companion, can definitely talk to qlab and to a lot of different pieces of software, and that's going to sit inside of your Stream Deck. So that might be a thing to take a look at. Also, things like the ATEM OSC, or using a MixEffect Pro. MixEffect Pro will take a lot of the OSC commands and convert them to ATEM commands. And so then you can have something that looks like, you can have something that's going to activate. You can either have qlab send those out on its own. It can send the instructions out, or you can have something bigger like Isadora managing both of those things at the same time. Next question.
Paul Thomas in looks like Angelsley, UK. What's the difference between SMPTE 372M cable and normal 75 ohm BNC cable? Is it mostly marketing gimmick, or does it only make a difference in long lengths, perhaps?
Go ahead, Courtney.
It mainly makes a difference in long lengths. The 372 can carry 3 gigabit HD, full HD at 60 frames per second. The regular being, RG59 can carry for short distances, but probably not 60 frames per second reliably. You're going to get some, stuttering or dropouts or noise. So that's a problem. It depends on who made the cable. Belden cable is usually pretty good for the regular old RG59, and then the RG6 for the better high, the high end HD cables. So it's not necessarily just marketing, but you can test. I know a lot of people who have the old BNC cables that we used to use for analog, and you just put them on a cable tester and test them for frequency and do a frequency sweep on them to see if they will handle the higher frequency 3 megabits. And if they will, then we use them,
Yeah, I think that what we're seeing the difference is what you call them and what their performance spec is. So if it carries a 4K signal or a 1080p signal at a certain distance, then it meets the requirements to be SMPTE. But there's lots and lots of cables that are 75 ohm. so it's just a more specific one that has actually been certified within that. Next question.
And apologies to those in Anglesey. I have been corrected. Thank you very much. Douglas Carmichael, if a hardware manufacturer made a ZoomTX appliance, should it have SDI along with NDI 2110? Or should it take an Apple approach and have only NDI 2110?
Go ahead, John.
I always recommend more than less. Like having a headphone jack would be nice on an iPhone. So I would not want to go the Apple approach for sure. NDI is great, but there's a lot of use cases with short distances where you're having an SDI connection is going to work always. I mean, I don't have to rely on another team potentially at a larger corporation to do the networking portion.
Yeah, if you're going to do, some kind of box, if you were going to create a ZoomTX kind of box, you want to get it out to broadcasters, and most broadcasters are still using SDI. So if you rolled out a 2110 NDI, it'd just be a huge waste of money, and it would, for the price of a card. It doesn't cost you very much to support a 4-channel or 8-channel card in that box in the grand scheme of what it'll take to build it. So it would be basically a unforced error to build it that way. Next question.
Comes from our own Alex Gollner here in London, and he says, Apple and FMC, Future Media Concepts, have announced 3 new Apple Pro Video training and certifications. They might deliver much of this training digitally. What do you think? And he's got a link there to it.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yes. Apple used to do a long program. Sorry about the sync. I'm just going to wait for Zoom to catch up. and I can just wait for it to catch up.
I just
Anyway,
keep talking.
The Apple used to have a qualification for both teaching Final Cut Pro and also, of course, learning Final Cut Pro. And that used to be important, obviously, 10 years ago when lots of people were trying to learn it and use it in professional contexts. And they closed these down about 2 or 3 years ago, and then it looks like they're starting them up again, delivered through FMC. What's interesting about this one is the fact that they're listing 6 bullet points about what this Pro Video Training and Certification Program is, which is live interactive training courses in English, Chinese, Japanese, French, Spanish, and German, certification exams, recorded workshops, then live conferences supported by Apple, also certification prep workshops. They're also offering separately on-site training services, but the first few things seem to be all the kind of stuff that could be delivered online and can be done in a similar way to the way the Apple developer sessions were being done in October, November last year. So interesting, both from the fact that Apple might be announcing this themselves probably on Monday in terms of publicly supporting Final Cut Pro, and secondly, the fact they're maybe going to be delivering this training in a slightly different way than other folks do.
Bill?
Yeah, it was interesting. When I got the news yesterday, first of all, there on some of the boards that I frequent, there had been a lot of grumbling for the last year and a half after the vendor who was providing Apple training. It seems like it didn't work out very well. And so it has been a long gap in between. And now suddenly everybody is really excited about this. One of the things I thought was mostly interesting is that they had 3 modules that they're billboarding. The first one specifically talks about editing for social media, and it's kind of their beginner level course. So it looks to me like they are going out for this new generation of young digital content creators and trying to specifically develop some training to bring them into the fold, because Final Cut has done particularly well in that zone. And then there's 2 other additional more high level, they describe them as intermediate and advanced training. And it seems to me that they're for the kind of people who want to do this kind of thing, who want to edit for either high-end motion picture, high-end television, or to take them up into the using the kind of tools in Final Cut, like the roll system and things like that are pretty complex, but have an amazing, powerful utility when used to like send out to network and to all sorts of users who have different requirements. There's a lot of automation built into Final Cut that I think people who don't use it don't understand is in there, some of which can take things that take 2 or 3 days to do and move them down into taking an hour to do. So it's very powerful, and I think they're trying to start to promote some of those things.
Hey, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I would say that I know people at FMC. I've worked for FMC. I know that they have a very strong relationship with Apple, and I think that they also, they jumped on digital delivery, and doing their shows on Zoom very quickly, in 2020. Yep. And I think this is super interesting. I'm very interested to see what comes of it.
Yeah, Alex?
Yeah. So from that point of view, I'm really interested in the idea of, I like the idea of there being a Final Cut Pro Creative Summit next year, but I also like the idea of this being an ongoing process. Because one of the bullet points is that Apple supported live conferences as part of this, which is good. I do think it's good from the kind of future of Final Cut point of view in terms of Apple promoting it, because one of the questions usually is when somebody says, hey, can we get this feature film done? You should use Final Cut Pro, and people will say, well, where can we get the crew to do it? Where can we find the editor, the assistant editors and stuff like that? Because people feel a lot safer if they know they can fire their team and hire a load of new people.
And is it free, or is it how much does it cost? What do we know what that is?
No, this has not been announced yet. They say it'll all be kind of announced and starting by the end of this quarter, which I guess means the end of March. So it's not explaining if it's free, but Resolve stuff is mostly free in terms of their stuff like that. But I don't know if there'll be a book to go with the certification. Resolve's books are available on Amazon, but they're also available as free PDFs to download in terms of the qualification and teaching yourself stuff as well as the videos. So they'll see how they do it.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see. I think that it would make a lot of sense for them to make it free and make it available. And I can see Apple underwriting that. Education is a big piece of that puzzle. I mean, I think there's lots of easy. There's ways to do this. I think that could be like for instance, I think that shooting short films and then cutting them and breaking it down, like handing everybody something and having them do it. I know that it seems like a the systematic certification process, I think it does make sure that you know everything about the app, but I'm not sure. You know, I have benefited greatly from certification processes. I took the After Effects one right before I went to Lucasfilm, but I already had the job, so I just had to make sure that I knew where all the buttons were. And we took the teaching certifications from Apple long ago for Final Cut and Motion and Shake, mostly so that we could become a reseller, so that we could buy cheaper machines. But the reality is that the only reason I knew how to use Shake was because I sat through that. You know, it was like one of those things, like you systematically had to kind of work through that process. Go ahead, Chris, pretty quick.
Super quick. My real problem with certification type things, of which I've never taken one, is because I'm completely self-taught, I don't know what anything is called. So
Right.
if it comes to taking a test, it's like, what is it? I was like, I don't know. It's the little thing in the corner. I click on that and I find the thing that works.
It's Command-Shift-C. It's Command-Shift-C. Like that's all I know. Go ahead, Bill, real quick.
Absolutely. And really quickly, I think this might be partially in response to the fact that Blackmagic has done a really good job on their website of putting out training for Resolve. I've had a couple people talk to me about how good that site works for people coming into it for the first time. I think Apple's trying to follow in their footsteps.
Patty Monteishan, I'm just going to call her out. She's the goddess of doing training. She went from Avid to Apple to Blackmagic to, you know, like she just comes in and income structure. so it's and I think she's still doing a lot of the Blackmagic stuff. Go ahead. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. He says, "Why did the Golden Globes fail to stream the event?"
Go ahead, Courtney.
It wasn't a technical issue.
Yeah, it didn't fail. They just didn't do it.
Yeah. No, the problem was the Golden Globes this year. They have been criticized for many years for being not diverse at all. It's like 70 white old men that make up the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, which votes on the Golden Globes every year. And they've been so criticized that it came to a head this year, and everyone boycotted them. NBC pulled the plug on their broadcast, they had a contract for that. All the stars that were nominated refused to show up, so there was no red carpet. And since it was only they did get together, Beverly Hilton, who has the contract for hosting the Golden Globes every year and to infinity, I think. They got together, they drank some, and they tweeted about who won, but only the 65 old men. They have tried to they've hired diversity management, and they've brought in 4 or 5 people of color, I think, this year. So maybe in the future they'll go back, but they've received such bad negative press that I don't know if they'll ever recover from.
Yeah, broadcasts are expensive, and so if you lose your sponsor to broadcast and you can't find another sponsor, that's why you stop broadcasting, because it goes really quickly down to a camera in the back, you know. And so
with no celebrities, there's nobody to really.
There's no reason to watch.
No reason to watch.
Yeah, exactly. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida asks, "What is a modeling microphone?"
Go ahead, Courtney.
My model of microphone won't accept
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Well, there's 2 types of modeling microphones, I guess. The one I'm using is modeled after a Neumann U87, but it's a much cheaper version. So they tailor the capsule and the FET preamp to give the same response. And here's the response card. I don't know if you can see it, but all microphones have a different response by that indicated by this little curve here. So they're not necessarily flat. They'll have peaks and valleys in certain areas. And the other way to model a microphone is actually in a digital signal processor in a piece of software, where they can take that particular frequency curve of a specific microphone and apply a equalization curve to your signal in real time to make it sound more like, a Neumann or whatever microphone you're trying to emulate. So it'll make it sound similar by modeling it, so it delivers the same specifications and characteristics of that microphone in real time in digital signal processing.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for covering that, Courtney. So, I think the only thing that I would want to highlight is the benefit of it is you can then, in software after the fact, change that microphone. So if you have a singer who's laid down something that doesn't sound great for their voice, you can start playing around with different types of microphones before you start really investing into having that slew of microphones that are going to sound the best for any type of situation.
Go ahead, Bill.
All of that. And then there's one other thing. Remember that if you're using a microphone and you're going to put it into a software and try to model a different microphone, that original microphone has to be good enough to have actually resolved everything that microphone, like if you're trying to do a Neumann U87 or something like that, and you're starting out with an SM57, it's going to be hard for you to get to those beautiful overtones and the breadth of a Neumann with a simple microphone. So some people take the approach of taking like an Earthworks or something that's known to be very flat, like a scientific type microphone, thinking, okay, I'll get all the frequencies with that, and then I'll let this tone shaper shape it into a U47 or something like that. 1,000 approaches. Just, it's not as simple as buying a cheap microphone and putting this on it to get the results you might be looking for.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. He says, IFTTT, if this, then that, has an available integration for Zoom. One example use case is to use Google Wi-Fi to prioritize Zoom call quality. How might this actually work, and what other use cases might there be?
Jeffrey?
Don't. Simple as that. The biggest problem is when you're sending stuff out to the internet, and when it works perfectly. But when it doesn't, it crashes and burns perfectly too. So I've tried doing this, hooking up lights where it's just basically press a button and all my lights will turn on. I've had it where 15 minutes later the lights will turn on, and then if you use it and it doesn't work, then you're going to turn lights on. Then all of a sudden, halfway through your show, your lights might turn off, and it just doesn't make much sense to have that type of connection. Now, on the back end, like when something gets posted on YouTube, I get notification on there. That type of stuff, that's perfect for IFTTT, but I would never use it in any type of production mode.
Yeah, I have to admit that I'm in the same camp with Jeffrey here, is that I won't use it for anything in production. It's fun for fun things. Like cute things that make things better, but using something like this, they say to err is human, but to really screw things up requires a computer. And automated systems that do things on their own is a great way to have things do things on their own. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas is up next. He says, according to DW.com, Meta is leaning on remote positions to hire 10,000 new workers in Europe for the metaverse, allowing new employees to work from anywhere within a group of European Union countries. Is the metaverse an ideal case for remote work?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I would be afraid of that because the metaverse, with a little AI, they can all be automated after all, because they're just, they're not real people.
I think the metaverse is going to take a while. I think that's all I'll say, is that I think that it's what I've seen so far feels like it's a couple years away. And then I know from doing computer graphics that the closer you get it to real, the weirder it'll get. So there's this uncanny valley is a really deep valley. And spending a lot of time talking to people who are really close to human but not is like, I dealt with a project that we did that used the new MetaHuman stuff from Unreal, and the biggest problem we had, it would have been, if we had used memojis from Apple, it would have been infinitely easier than if we had done that. But because we used things that looked close enough to a human, it became infinitely difficult. And so that was keeping it basic, I think, is important. But I also think, and I've said this before, is I really think that there is our frontal lobe saying that this is a community or this is a connection, and our lower brain knowing that it's not, causes depression. Like I think that when we see this in social media, and we'll see it more in the metaverse, when we start having tons of people sitting there, our front, this is I think I've told this story before on the show, but the easiest way to kill ants is with Splenda. You drop sugar down, and then you start cutting the sugar with Splenda until it's all Splenda. The ant can't tell the difference, and it kills the like it's just starving you to death of connection, because you feel like you're connected, but you're not. Next question.
Peter Moss in Belgium is up next, and Peter says, I was asked to spotlight a panel of 3 speakers in a Zoom webinar. The spotlight was visible for the participants. Is it possible to have the 3 speakers spotlighted for the attendees also, as it seems only one speaker was visible for the attendees?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I wanted to just first of all clarify the terminology. You say participants. I'm guessing you mean panelists, because in a webinar you'd have panelists and attendees rather than participants, which would be in a meeting. But this should work so long as you are spotlighting and not pinning. Pinning will only be for your own personal view. So you do definitely want to spotlight. You want to make sure you are spotlighting and not pinning, and also that hopefully you're the host, and you'll also want to make sure that you have the option checked for attendee view follows host view. And make sure that you have your spotlights as spotlights, not pins.
The other thing is that you want to set, you can decide how aggressive you want, but in Zoom, in the back end, you want to set force updates to a certain level of Zoom, because there are older versions of Zoom which they could still join your event and not see. That was a update that was done, I think, last September. So it's been over a year now. And I think that if you go back over a year, but there's still people that could have an older version that will not see multiple spotlights, because that was a new feature. Also, I'm not sure if the web version sees multiple spotlights. I think that I can't remember whether that's been updated. That was a long time problem for spotlighting. It was the web version. Go ahead, Rupert.
I think behavior can vary on mobile devices too, like iPads, iPhones, all that kind of thing. So you may want to look at what your your attendees are connecting with.
In general, this is a good argument for why you may want to use something like an OBS or a switcher or something, is that you can force that output to be what you want it to be. It does take a little bit more infrastructure, but a Zoom ISO plus Zoom OSC or Zoom ISO and a switcher or something else feeding back. What we've done for a lot of webinars is that we run it through our system and then we push it back out to the world. We push it back out to the webinar the way we want it to look. Now we can design it. We can make, not only can we do spotlights, we can have super sources and lower thirds and opens and play movies and do all the other things. And they all go into the webinar. And so for the user, they just see something that looks great. That's still a single window, and it just overrides all of those issues. So you may want to take some research into that, and a lot of us do that here. So if you have any questions about it, there's a lot of people here that do those kinds of events. Next question.
Brian Bavito in Detroit, Michigan is up next, and he says, did anyone see the announcement from Sundance Film Festival regarding making the event primarily online? The new frontier portion of the event, focusing on AR, VR, and immersive, will be fully virtual.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I took a look at this. They have these satellite screens, but they appear to have built this big online platform or event thing that's coming. It looks to be very interactive, very AR, even at a web browser level. It's interesting. You dive into the site. I think it's called Horizons or New Horizons or something, and it's very intensive. And the first thing you see is a big accessibility button. So if you're not into all of that stuff, you have to kind of provide a way for other users to get in there. So it's just an interesting how they're approaching that.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
That was the best part about South by Southwest last year, was the video, the online video stuff. We could actually sit in our living room and watch the movies, watch the shorts and everything like that through our TV, through I think Roku and Fire and all that other stuff. And of course with VR, you wouldn't want to fly somewhere just to put on a pair of VR goggles and then fly back. So it just makes more sense to put the VR goggles on and have the experience in your home and then go from there. So I think they're going to have great success with this format.
I think that film festivals should be online. I think that they're giving up a huge amount. I get that they all want to connect, and I think you can still have parties and do those things, but I think that they could get a much larger audience and be much more influential with a larger footprint. Next question.
Paul Wallace is up next from Austin, Texas. He says, how does the WLM loudness meter get inserted into an office hours Zoom session?
I go with Rupert.
So funny enough, it's not here right now, but generally speaking, we'll have a participant here with showing the WLM meters. That's usually one of the panelists or one of the crew has a separate machine logged into the meeting, and that machine is running the WLM meters, so it's listening to the meeting basically, and then it'll have some kind of screen scrape on there and feed that back. Feed the view of the WM meters back into the meeting as basically a virtual camera, and that'll appear as a participant. So it's like a virtual participant that's listening to the audio and then feeding back the visualization of the audio levels.
I go with Chris.
Yeah, and by screen scrape, Rupert, means by putting it on a screen, if you can grab that screen and not do a screen share, which of course, wrecks the whole experience. So basically you're going to do, this is a great example of where OBS will just sit and churn and do that all day. You could put OBS for free on a machine, pick that window and say, make that my virtual camera. I know that at the beginning of the pandemic, the real eye-opener for me in this whole world was understanding what a virtual camera was. I was like, oh, wow, you can do so much when you know what that is.
And I think that for a long time, we just thought that it was like some kind of thing that wasn't like Siphon was going to be something that, I don't know if that'll really work. And it's got something in between and it just works. Go ahead, Rupert.
Chris made a good point about OBS being able to sit there and do it all day. It can, but I think actually what we have seen, particularly in after hours, is if the same instance of OBS, in WLM is running all day, like 20 hours, by the time 20 hours comes around, it's got a bit of sync issue there. So it can sit there all day, but I think we've seen a little bit of drift over that time.
But after 20 hours, it's time to go do another office hours show. So
yeah,
it's
exactly.
probably okay.
Well, and I think also that it is a it's not built. We're using it for something that's not built for, and is most likely a lot of us run these on processors that aren't very powerful because it's like, oh, it's some extra computer I have laying around. Like I'm working on I realize I have a bunch of laptops that I don't use anymore, like little ones, like that are cheap and not very good. And I'm going to start using those for little. One is going to be like a little billboard system that I'm gonna have, so that there's a window sitting in here that's just playing like this is what's coming up tomorrow, and remember that Tony's show is at at 5, and and be able to set up scheduling. I'm gonna I'm literally getting digital signage software for it so that I can sit there and run.
You're not going to use Keynote?
No, I'm not, because I need more. I'm going to talk to Phil. I'm going to talk to Phil about it and figure out what I should put on it, because the main thing is that I want to be able to schedule things. So the idea is Keynote would be great, and it may start as Keynote, to be fair. But I think that what I want to do is I want to have it be like, around Tony's show, for instance, or around a Belfast or a Todd Reynolds concert or something, that it's telling you more often that you should be doing that, and then it slows down, and then it plays something else, and then it, but it's always this kind of like little bot that tells us things that just sitting in one of the windows. And so those are the kind of things. But I think that the reason I say that is I was looking at these old computers, and I know that eventually I have to restart it every once in a while because it'll just run out of memory. Next question.
Fess up, Alex. You want to foresee a future where we can put office hours on all the buildings in Times Square?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. All right.
Okay, Rupert McRae is up next. He says, does a virtual background in Zoom limit the participant's video to 720p and a 1080p meeting?
I wonder what it would cost to do that takeover. Just suddenly 2 hours of office hours, or an hour of office hours, just playing on every screen in Times Square. It would be the most weird thing ever.
Mind boggles.
Anyway, all right. Jeffrey.
Do you follow that? I have not seen nor heard of any issue where it will downgrade the resolution simply because you're using a virtual background. However, it really depends on the computer that you're running it on and what type of process. If you look through the specs, it says if you're running a Zoom, you can run, for example, you can run a Core i3. But if you start using virtual backgrounds, you better have a better Core i5. Or more to be able to do that. So it's more about how much bandwidth and how much process that can send the video.
Mitchell.
I don't know about the 720, but I do know that it'll increase dramatically the chances of me sending you a T-shirt that says "No virtual backgrounds."
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and it's very intensive to cut you out and paste you over a virtual background in real time without too much delay. You have to use basically a graphics processor, so you have to turn on hardware processing in Zoom because the difference between 720 and 1080 is times 4 number of pixels that it has to track and project its path in order to get the outline clean around your head, and that's why you see people whose hands move quickly. It can't track it and calculate the position of the mat fast enough. So that may be if they do limit you to 720p, that's probably the reason.
Yeah, go ahead, Doug. Alex.
My Mac is a Core i7 from 2016, and I quit out the Finder in order to get enough processing power to just do this without a virtual background. So yes, it is about the power of the computer at the client end.
I don't know for sure if it's limiting it, but I can tell you that I've never seen anybody with a virtual background be more than 720. Like I look at their feed and I research it. So I don't know if that is a hard and fast rule. I've just never actually seen it in the wild. I think that it for at least 95% of the process people who join, if you turn virtual background on, you're going to be at 720. Next question.
Next one comes to us from TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I will be traveling by plane with some of my camera gear in May, looking for a recommendation.
Sorry, my bad. That's the yeah.
That's your travel. Yeah. Okay. I see
it's
it.
my fault. Let's see. We'll put that back into voting. All right. Go ahead.
Yeah. So looks like the one I have up on my screen now is from Rob Harris in Minneapolis. Yes, it says, have the settings for controlling a computer remotely via Zoom changed? Went to control a client's computer yesterday for the first time in a couple of weeks, and the on-screen buttons were gone.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I went back to check the release notes. The last change to do anything to do with remote control was in 5.8.6 on November 28th last year, so nothing's changed for a while, and that change was specifically related to just remote control for slide control. So I don't think anything's changed recently. That is, unless you or maybe your client there has updated just incrementally to some other change or some other update. But I would just make sure that you're both on the latest version and that your client is being prompted for you when you're requesting screen control, because it will be dependent on that agreement.
And the other thing is that if they have two screens and you accidentally got on the wrong screen, you would see Zoom, but it would not have the controls. So, I mean, that's the only other option that I could think of, is that you would definitely have that behavior. Next question.
Tony Mobley in Newton, Georgia says, my brother has joined Office Hours community working on his show. He has an issue with black frame showing on his iPhone and filmic going into his ATEM Mini Extreme. Is there a fix?
Is this random black frames or constant black frames, Tony?
It's constant. He can't get rid of it. He's reset everything.
I mean, but it's just black.
It means a mortise. I think
it's not showing any video.
A mortise around the frame, a black border.
Oh, a black frame showing this iPhone. Rupert?
Yeah, I was going to ask that question, whether we're talking about the borders, and then it's probably either aspect ratio. Yeah. So aspect ratio mismatch, I guess.
And what channel, what input is it going into?
He has it in one right now.
And so what I would do is I would take everything out of one, put it in by itself. I would unplug everything, restart the ATEM, turn it into filmic, and plug it back into. And do you know what phone he's using? What?
iPhone 11.
Yeah, it should work fine. But I would put it in. I would first test it. I'd turn the ATEM off, restart it. I would then plug it back in and take the phone and plug it into different inputs, starting at one, really just 1 and 2, to see whether the behavior changes. But I would, I almost never put anything into one I don't have to. So just like if it's, I put things into one when I'm out of inputs, because it has a lot of odd behaviors. It's designed to be a low latency system that is designed to pass things through differently. So I would try a different input, but I would take, just to test it, I would take everything out, put it into one, see what it looks like, then put it into 2, and then come back and tell us what he saw. If you saw the black frame across all of it, then we'll have a new problem.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Next question.
Sarah Doyle in Falls Church, Virginia says, Zoom has native multilingual simultaneous interpretation, but has anyone tried or utilized the Microsoft Teams app, or did you have to find an alternative solution?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I use the Microsoft Teams app. It's pretty okay with the translation. Stream also offers some like automatic translation that you can export and then overlay into your videos if you're going to use it elsewhere. Again, it's using the same technology that powers the Office 365 and voice to text and all that. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty built out, but depending on the voice, depending on the translation, what actual people mean, like I don't trust automatic translations too often.
I will say that we've used it for Skype for Business in some of the distributions that have used the translation, and our experience has been that it is stunningly good. Like it's just like that was good mics to exactly all the stuff that John said. It'll fall apart if you give it bad audio, but the stuff that we did, it was complicated, talking about things, and we couldn't believe at how good it is. I think Microsoft is the high bar at the moment, with Google coming in behind it. But they've done it. They've been working on that for a decade. Go ahead, Courtney, real quick.
Is that, are you talking about translation to text, closed captioning? Or
we were only looking at closed captioning. You could, once you convert it to text, changing it to verbal is not that hard. But we were only paying attention to the text, but we just couldn't believe how. And I will say that Google Meet does a pretty good job as well. But the Microsoft solution is unbelievable.
You can also use Azure's voice service.
Yeah.
It uses the same backend APIs. So you could build your own on top of it, integrate it with anybody you want to.
Yeah, and AWS has one too. But I will say that again, the Microsoft one, we were working on a meeting that had a lot of technical terms, and it was hitting them all. And we just kept on staring at it, just going, I don't even know how it's even doing that. A stenographer couldn't do what we were seeing, and so it's kind of amazing. Next question.
Paul Wallace is back with, will Apple merge with Disney Plus, Marriage Made in Heaven? Who will prevail in 2022's streaming ratings? And he says, see budgets, and he's got a link there to budgets, I guess.
Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
No, I don't think Apple, well, not Apple TV Plus won't merge with Disney Plus because they have different functions within their portfolio. Disney Plus's portfolio uses it's part of the Disney portfolio to drive people to theme parks, to buy products, to essentially a subscription to their narrative concepts of storytelling in the case of Disney, whereas Apple use it for their stuff for hardware sales and also being part of the Apple Club and bundling a different kind of bundle.
Right.
But it might happen if Apple actually bought Disney, which I suppose they could, and then they would merge.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I think if Apple bought Disney, then we'd really be talking about any type of monopoly type situation there. If anything, it's just going to be a bundle. The only thing that I've heard in the next year that will be happening is HBO is going to be joining and the Warner Media is going to be joining Discovery, and so you might have a new service come from that.
Yeah, I've been a strong proponent that Apple should buy Disney for maybe 5 or 6 years. So I definitely think that it made sense back then. I think the point that was already made is that the antitrust is probably not Apple can't do it anymore. They could have done it years ago, but I don't think that they could do it now. There'd be too much antitrust issues, and they couldn't get it through, at least in the current political structure in the United States. Next question.
Moving on to Chris Sabato in Salem, Oregon. He says, we have 6 strands of dark multimode fiber installed in our venue that I'd like to use. Any recommendations for SDI transceivers that would work with multimode? For products that use SFPs, do both parts have to support multimode or just the SFP?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, so I, in the past, or currently even, I use Blackmagic to kind of do that. I use the same transceivers on both sides. Multi-mode versus single mode is just a cabling thing, but you have to make sure that your cablings match your SFPs, and then you should be fine for that.
I have to admit, we've never used multi-mode for anything. so
shorter distances, right?
Yeah. It was much shorter distances, and so I think that'll be the big thing is just how far. I mean, it's shorter distances in a fiber world, but not. It's still very long distances in a copper world. So. It's not that they can't work. It's just that we've been pretty religious about single mode fiber for decades. Next question.
Justin Geller in Philadelphia says, looking for recommendations for an audio switcher that can sweep stereo balanced inputs from 2 sources, sending to a balanced stereo output with a foot pedal switch or some sort of external switch. Bonus if the switching can be done over a network.
Go ahead, Chris.
I yield my time, but I might come back.
I mean, you're just looking for anything that has remote control. I mean, any mixer will be able to mix between these things. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
So I remember the question now. I was spaced out. Sorry. So first of all, it's a super interesting question, Justin, and I would love to know what you're trying to do. I will tell you that if you want to go to like if you think of like a lead guitar rock and roll, giant pedal board, those used to, the king of the road there was called a Bradshaw, and Bradshaw used to make custom switching setups for pedal boards. And if you really look at what they're doing, it's spectacular. But the Bradshaw logic is what would run those. I think the Edge uses a Bradshaw. And I would imagine that in that realm, you're going to find something. I know you're looking for balanced audio and not like, guitar pedal stuff. But much of the time, the switching stuff that they're doing is switching between the output of one rack mount unit to another rack mount unit. So I think if you delve into that world, you'll find your answer.
Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas is coming up next again. And this time he says, is a secret trick or magic bullet in making up, is there a secret trick or magic bullet in making up Ethernet cables? That's where I was going. Or is it a lost cause, give up, and order ready-made from Monoprice?
I go with Rupert.
What I will say is I'll always use purchased cables wherever I can. I mean, I'm only going to make one or repair one or terminate an end if I've got no other choice or time crunch or something like that. Having said that, I mean, some people find the push through crimps helpful if they're having trouble terminating the the regular ones. I'm a bit of a traditionalist, I guess, and don't use those. I use the original method. I think it does take practice if you're going to do it that way, and good tools. There's a lot of cheap little crimpers out there, cheap little terminators, and they're all going to make your life harder. So it's good to have good tools to do it. And I can do a demo in After Hours sometime, maybe.
You go with
and a tester, a good tester.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, tester is perfect. I used to crimp cables like no tomorrow. The biggest problem is if you're running it through a space that you just can't have that head in there. You just got to run the cable like through walls and things like that. The one thing that I love is the fact that they've made the heads with the cables that can actually pass through it, so you can get a little bit of extra lead, so you know exactly which wire is coming through that connector, and then the cutter will just take off that end. So if you're going to get anything, get them where the wires can pull out of the head, so you making sure that you're making the cable solid.
Sorry, I got myself in the wrong. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, so always use a patch cable if you can, manufactured by somebody. I always will go into a female Cat 5 if I'm making my own into a standard patch cable, because you're never going to meet the tolerances that a machine can do. And so if you need the peak performance of it, I would always recommend going down that path.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I'd go for the Monoprice cables for links like 25, 50, or 100 feet. If you got to pull cable through a conduit where you're going to have to put the connectors on the end of it, make sure you have a crimping tool that is high quality that cleaves the cable evenly so that all the ends go, and when you insert them into the connector, all end up tight and in, and a good crimper that will push and make sure the little plastic connectors that you buy, the RJ45s, are high quality and have if you buy the real cheap Chinese ones, a lot of times they'll be iffy connections.
And we'll go just a couple minutes over, by the way, just to finish up a couple more questions. This question, 2 more questions, and then we'll move on to the second hour. I will say that if you're not good at this already, and you're not a glutton for punishment, I would just buy them at this point. I mean, if you're already good at it, that's fine. But I don't think that Ethernet skills are. I mean, it's a painful skill to have, and it takes. I even with the pull throughs, I will say it takes some patience and practice, and you got to really decide if you want to get good at that. I went down the path. I built a lot of my own cables, and I went down the path of building Ethernet cables, and then decided to buy them, and or pay someone to build them for me, but not do them myself.
Make sure you don't hire someone who's colorblind.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I even within our company, no one likes to make Ethernet cables. Anyway, next question.
Jens in Sandpoint, Idaho's up next. He says, what is your preferred way of splitting HDMI camera feeds for front of house and webinar to be switched separately?
Go ahead, Chris.
Jens, first of all, Sandpoint, Idaho must be beautiful. He's up in the little tippy point, like nearly in Canada. First of all, I'll say you're in a delicate place. I don't think HDMI really wants to be used the way you're doing it. Yes, there are splitters, you can split it, but there's going to be a tipping point where you're going to find that the better way of doing this is to get that into SDI pretty quickly. And what I would do is I would get it into an SDI router and then into an SDI switcher. And I think it's going to be a much more robust way to do that. But yeah, you could do a little splitter if you had to.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that the cheap ones just are not very reliable. I mean, I use a Monoprice 8x8, which still has its own issues. Mostly EDID,
Elemental B.
yeah, exactly. Issues where it doesn't register what's on the other side, and then the Mac doesn't know what to do with it. So those are the things that I have the biggest problem with. Go ahead, Bill.
I just wanted to say that I've been splitting my HDMI signal using a trip-light powered splitter. I would do that over anything that's passive just to make sure that the signal's coming out the split end is as close. That might work for you.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
And also, Jen's, pop into After Hours sometimes. I'd love to hear about what you're doing way up there in Idaho.
Yeah, exactly. Next question.
Spike Rogers is up next. In Berlin, when building an SDI convenience panel, is it common to include all switcher and router ins and outs on the panel and small patch SDI patches outside to connect it all? Or is it more common to only have the router inputs and patch behind the panel?
Well, we definitely have a mixture. We only put stuff on the convenience panel that we need. So there are a lot of times with a router, if we have a 40 by 40 router or a 244 or 288 or 144 or 72 or whatever it is, there's a lot of stuff that's internal routed between devices that a lot of times we won't all that stuff doesn't need to be put on the outside and then routed. The only exception to that, which is a big piece of our master control, is that if you start using patch panels, so these aren't convenience panels, but patch panels, we will now run everything out to the patches so that we can by hand repatch any piece of I/O. It creates a lot more paperwork with the diagrams, and it also creates a lot more understanding of what you're doing. The advantage of that, of course, is if the router goes down, we can actually manually route around the router, and then it also greatly expands what the utility of the router, because now you're not trying to unplug and plug things in because you don't have enough router. For this show, we need these inputs, and so you just patch. And that's what, if you see in a broadcast truck, that's why they all have big patch panels, is because you can't put everything into the router. Go ahead, Courtney.
And just be forewarned, most SDI has enough gain to not be bothered by this, but every connector you put has about a 2 to 3 dB loss in signal. So if you have a patch panel that goes from one connector to another connector to a pass-through connector, just to get to the back of the patch panel, that's 3 connectors you've gone through. And then you add a long 100-foot cable on the other end of it, or a patch cable that goes to another connector, which goes to another connector, which goes to the patch panel. You're doing a 3 dB loss each time, and so you can run into signal loss problems where the signal may get a little noisy on the other end.
Mm-hmm. Good, Chris?
Correction, you can put everything in the router if you buy a big enough router. And also, I gotta say, Alex, it made me sad. It made me a little sad when I found out you didn't like normal through patch bays. I think normal through patch bays are magic.
So you've never had a broadcast where someone pulled a pin out and it sent the wrong signal to 1 million people. Once you do that once, you never want a normal patch bay again. Like a normal patch bay again. Like it's like so someone pulled a cable out, and it would have been much better for it to be black. like that, and that just changed and the first thing we started doing is doing non-normal just for the outputs. So we started putting those in, and then after that, we just decided so the difference, by the way, what Chris is asking about is that you have a normaled patch means that there's a signal going through it, and the only time you change the signal is when you break it and you push it in, and that's the way most trucks work. You drop a patch cable in, and it interrupts it with whatever you put in there. I use non-normal patches, which means that you need to put literally loop pins in everything, or loop. We have little pins that we drop in. There is another advantage to that, which is that most normal patches don't carry 12K or 12G. So it's actually hard to find them that'll do that, and they're really expensive. Whereas the ones, the unnormaled at 12G are relatively inexpensive because they're just metal, right? Anyway, it only takes like one really bad time when someone wasn't thinking and they're a little tired and they pull the wrong cable out, and it sends a signal that is not supposed to be going out, And
One
to
day.
a lot of people, it only takes one it literally lasted for like a second and a half, and it felt like an eternity, and everyone was yelling, and then there were 3 weeks of meetings, and then you're like, I never want to use one of those again.
One day off the air, I want to hear what got broadcast.
So I'm not going to talk about that. So anyway, it was horrible. Anyway, it wasn't like illegal horrible. It was just
Not publicly.
Yeah. So anyway, it was. So that's why I don't use normal patch base. It's yeah. There's a lot of scar tissue is what I guess what we would call that. All right. So anyway, all right. We have finished the hour, and now we are going into the second hour, and we're going to move in. I think the one thing. Yeah. There we go. And so I thought we could talk about this a little bit more. We've talked about it a long time ago, I think, and I thought it was worth having another conversation, and mostly because there was a request. Just so you know, when we have those meetings, when we say, "Hey, we'd like to brainstorm about something," usually I'm serious. Like if you bring it up, that's the list. After that day that we do that, the list that I'm working from is the list that we talked about. So anyway, so I thought I'd grab a couple. I'll start with a couple images, and then we can open it up to anybody else that wants to discuss stuff. But let me. One of the things that we pay a lot of attention to. This is kind of random, just giving our other panelists a moment to bring anything up that they want to bring up related to this. But let me cut to this. This is so. One thing that I have a tendency to do is take a lot of pictures of these carts. So I take every airport. I know this will sound crazy, but I promise you it's useful. And I would love to build a library of this. Every airport I go to, I pull the cart out and I take a picture. And I take a picture of I have like, I don't know how many of these. And the reason I take a picture is because I want to know one thing. And that is there a lip on the front? So the lip on the front, if you're a production person, is devastating. It just means that you can fit like half the cases. So let me see if I can show you what I'm talking about here. Let's see if I can get my mouse in the right place. Let's see if this. I thought this would be easier because I'd be able to use photos. There we go. This is the devil, right? So this is that's that front lip that's supposed to hold your cases in, and that just kills us. So anyway, we take pictures of these because we're always trying to figure out whether we can put our cases on. Every country seems to have a different one. And I'm surprised that someone hasn't cornered the market for this, but no, they're all different. They're all slightly different. This is what happens when you have a lot more cases. A couple of things to note in these cases here that we're doing is, number one is I got a bellhop to do this one. This is their case. As a person who does this a lot, if there's a bellhop, I'm going to use it. Like I'm just going to say, hey, I got a bunch of cases. Can I throw these on there? I'll pay them $20 or $30 or $40 or whatever. And usually it's kind of $1 to $2 a case is kind of that's the normal. And remember, you might be going back to the same airport again. So it's really good if that guy, you paid him well the first time, just in case your bag doesn't want to fall out. A couple things about this. You'll notice that all of the weights are on them. We have a scale. We weigh every single case, and we write it down to the 10th of a pound on it. And the reason we do that is because we only usually, if you write that on every one of those cases, and then you drop 2 or 3 of them, and you come with a whole bunch of cases, and you put 2 or 3 of them on the scale, and the person checking you in sees that, they won't make you take the rest of the cases off because they go, oh, they've already weighed them. We don't have to do this. So they'll let you kind of go through it. Another thing to notice, and these are just trying to give you some tips. Number one is we do how many out of 3 out of 10, 4 out of 26. You're tired when you land. You really want to know, remember how many, you can't remember how many cases you have off the top of your head. So having them, we line them all up when we're at the airport, we'll line them all up so that we know which one is missing. It also means that when we have that 3 out of 10 or whatever, we have a database of what was in it. So if we lose it, we know what we lost, just some little things that will help you. We will not walk away from a case until it has a tag on it. And I have not done that once, and I paid for it very quickly. So in FedEx or in things, never leave without seeing the tag. We had one with FedEx. I had $1,500 of drives that just disappeared. Like they just disappeared. Like into literally into thin air because it was the one time I've ever walked away from in FedEx with someone. You want to see the label on your box, not sitting on top of it, not anything else. And I know it'll sound annoying and you'll feel stupid for asking, but still make them do it. Like make someone put the thing on. Do not let them sit it on top. Do not let them, like there's 1,000 things that can go wrong, when that happens. And so, so we do all of that. A lot of times we're pretty careful about how we line things up so that we can see them relatively easily. Oops, that's still there. This is what a lot of those cases look like when they get lined up. So a lot of times you think about things. This is all of our cases. In this case, you can see a little logo. Putting logos on the side of your cases is good for a couple reasons. One is when things are chaotic and people are moving, you know which case belongs to who. That always helps. Also, when your client shoots behind the scenes, you see your logo show up on their Instagram. so it's a good, especially if you're doing working with really big companies. You can't say that, but if they take a picture with your logo on it, they can say that, and it's not your problem. So, and then you just quietly share it out. So, not super big like you're trying to advertise, but having little logos on the side of it, I've gotten work from that. This is the chairs that we bring. These are the chairs when we run out of those chairs. You have to sit on that chair for 12 hours a day, get more chairs. So all of these chairs, they came in a truck. They're our chairs, like they're $150 each or whatever, but they came in a truck and they're worth it. So did all the tables. You see the back tables are the ones that come with the Moscone, and these front tables are the ones that we have. They're just actually what I'm using right now. But those are little things when you're starting to move in and out. When I get the receipts, this is how I line them up. So this is literally, I will line them all up and take a picture because you might lose them somewhere in between, and then they lose your bags, and then you don't have the barcode. This is us starting to line those cases up. This is in Japan, I think, in Tokyo. So this is like getting cases out. If you're interested in that, this is what those cases look like in the back of a van. That, the other thing to think about is when you get to the other side, if you have a lot of cases, you want to think about how you're going to get them out. so we hire vans to do that, and they're not super expensive, but do not think that you're just going to be able to fit them into the bus. This is the mistake that many people who travel a lot will make the first time, and then they're sitting there trying to figure out how to break them up and do things. This is all part of logistics, is you have somebody on the other side managing who's going to pick you up and where they're going to pick you up and how they're going to pick you up and how many cases. Another thing to notice is that you'll see these little tags. These are priority tags. Those priority, when we were doing a lot with Pixel Core, we don't do as much traveling with I know because of COVID and stuff like that. We required all of our employees to fly United because United has the best press badge. The way that they charge you for the bags. And we'd have employees that say, well, I have a thing with Delta, and we're like, we don't care. Like if we're paying for the ticket, you're going to fly United. I mean, unless you're a really high end person. And the reason was we were all trying to get everybody on priority status. So we were trying to get all of our employees up to platinum or 1K or whatever. And the reason we did that is because you get three 70-pound bags for free as a 1K, and 2 bags for every person on the same ticket. So if you have 5 people on the same ticket and 1 person with it, you get 13 bags for free under 70 pounds. Yeah. And so when you're moving gear, it becomes a big deal. And so it was a huge business thing for us. And we had to go through a lot of angry employees that didn't understand that at first, but it was like, I'm stacking up a lot of miles on your tab, and I want to be able to, it saves me a lot of money, to move that. You'll also notice that we have these we would use these for local ones. This is a mailed out one, so it doesn't have anything written on it. And this is one of those little pads you can draw on that you can just say, this is what's in the case. We don't put those in when we ship them because we're telling people that we have a bunch of electronics. So we don't write, ATEM switcher or Blackmagic cameras or whatever. We do that when we put them in our own trucks, but we don't put those on there when we fly.
This box filled with expensive stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Now, this is what a lot of those boxes look like, unpackaged. And one of the things you'll notice is that we really like these SKBs. They make ones that are closed and ones that are opened, and we used a lot of them. I think you can kind of see it here. We ratchet them together. So they come in cases. They fly in cases, and there are all these racks. but they're different sections of things that we need, recorders or mixers or whatever. And then, but they stack up really nicely. And in some cases, I think might be able to see it there, might be too dark. We will take a ratchet strap and run it through all the handles and then tighten it, and it'll just turn into a case, and so that way it just doesn't, you're not worried about it falling over. Of course, all these come in their own cases, but this is and this is in I think the Rotocon in Japan too. I don't know why I got so many Japan photos. Anyway, so this was, but that's, that's where we, that's how we put together a lot of our kind of cases if we're flying, for checking stuff. This is a background that we used for an event in Germany, and but this is you'll see it's in East San Rafael, because this is what we would build these up in our space. This all flat. It was designed to flat pack, so it literally went out as almost nothing, and then we just construct it when we get there. As you can see, we used to have a lot of Pixelcore used to have a lot of Pelican cases. This is about half of them that are there. So we collected a lot of these as we went through. One of the things we used to do is I used to take a lot of videos of people taking our cases out of the plane, and then I would post them to folks in the company to remind people when you pack it, how hard they're being managed. I think a lot of people pack their gear thinking that it's going to be managed the way they manage it. If you don't feel comfortable dropping your case 3 feet, then you don't have it packed well. Like, that's something you just want to kind of think through in that process. Now, one of the things you can see here, this is another one where we've getting ready to go somewhere. I don't know where. Ratchet straps are your friend. Ratchets, get good at, the first time you buy them, they'll be very confusing. You won't understand them, but they're gold. So you'll tie them in. These are using these, we started buying the carts, and we just check the carts with it. So we stopped trying to figure out what carts are on the other end. These are the ProMaster, I think these are called the ProMaster carts or whatever. I think I've talked about them in the past. They're like $1,000 each and worth every penny. They don't, we've checked them all over the world, but you kind of ratchet them together. The other thing you'll notice is that all of these are upside down. So all of them are upside down because they stack better on the carts. So that the bottom will stack better and they'll slide less. We started to specialize for the most part for checking on 1650s. And the reason for using 1650s is they just turned out to be the right size on the carts and in the cars and everything else. They're the biggest you can get that you can still fit into a trunk, and so the 1640s, which are bigger, oddly enough, are almost impossible to put into the trunk of a car. So that became one of the things that we did here. This is what it looks like when you start getting big trucks. This is Rocket delivering this to Davos for us. And they have these nice big pieces. I'll show you a smaller version of this, but they kind of come in sections. And the reason that it's important to take pictures of this is to remind yourself of how it's going to be shipped. And other things that are important are, this is an issue. So that took a little time to open this case, because you want to think about how things are going to be exposed, especially if they're being shipped. It seems like a good idea, but once it's bent over, you have to bend it back before you can pull that slate off. So thinking about how things are going to get whacked is important. Also, no one's going to pay attention to do not tip. So this was we gave them specific instructions not to tip it, and then they were like, and we will now put it on its side and shrink wrap it. Everything was fine, but everything was all jumbled up. So you also have to kind of think that your cases, unless you're shipping them, and unless you deliver it. So one of the things that's important here is that unless you deliver it a certain way, they're gonna do it in whatever way makes sense to them, when they're packing it. So a lot of times we got into the habit, especially after this photo, of anytime we engaged Rocket or SOS or any of the company freight forwarders that we used, we gave them this on a pallet. Like, this is the way we want to have it go out, and we'd wrap it. Now, a lot of times they'll unwrap it because, again, they have to go through security. So a lot of times these might have to be, you can't, like, with all this stuff, you can't be super secure about it because someone's going to have to look at it if you're changing countries. And also, this was it's very cold. So you also want to think about how you're going to get things in and out. One mistake we made is I don't know if I have another picture of this. See, this case is really tall. It turns out it's twice as expensive to put on a plane if you make it higher than 52 inches, or 55 inches technically, but 52 inches to be safe. So we paid a lot of money for that. It was like a $15,000 mistake that hopefully I just saved somebody. the other thing that happens is we had to cut these open because someone had the smart idea of putting this down into a pallet, like, oh, it'll sit in the pallet. And then we couldn't get it out of the pallet. It took like a half an hour of getting that out. So those, but that's how your stuff is going to go in kind of larger scale. This is what it looks like. It's all opened up. And what you'll notice is that the tables that we had are all the tops of those cases. So Nate, by the way, Nate Hill. Hi, Nate. This is the tops of all those cases. And this was like this little room we had in Davos to do this. And so, but this is how it gets kind of unpacked. One of the things that we do a lot of, we probably shouldn't have done for this one, but we do anyway, is we build whole cases with shelves in them. It's super useful. Like, that's something people don't think about, but cases with shelves are great. You have your snacks and you have your mics and you have all your extra stuff and all the, and modern people send that out in cases, and you're opening the cases up and having them in shelves. A lot of times we'll have 2 or 3 shelf units that really save our cookies a lot. This is our old truck that we used to have. This is the E-track that you get on the sides, and then there's like a small E-track here. Key to the operation. I still miss that truck. I don't even have any use for it, but I miss it. We had this built from scratch, and so what happens is all of this stuff, all of these cinch. The ratchet straps all have just E-track, and they just lock in. So you just like lock them into one, and then you tighten them, and you can tighten everything and you saw that earlier. They do it with bars. We didn't do it with bars. We just did it with these. So we had a bundle of these, which we kept in very good shape. And then you just push a whole bunch of stuff into the truck. And here's the thing about this, every layer, you don't put them at the end of the truck. A truck this size, you don't put at the end. You do it every layer, every section. So you're doing 5 or 6 sections of stuff, because it reduces the amount of force. Because of what happens is if you put it at the very end, too much stuff can start moving back and forth, and it will literally blow the back of the doors out, and and it can also all slide to one side and literally tip your truck over. So you have to think about it in sections as you start to stack these trucks together. And so that's why the E-track is so important, is because you'll have one here, and then you'll have one here, and then you'll have one here. And in between, you're putting boxes in each one of these to make that work, to tie that together. It really makes a difference. I think that's all I had for my little stint. Hopefully that was not boring and somewhat useful of some stuff to think about. Anyway, go ahead, Courtney.
The one thing you didn't cover on you got into it, that with the hasp being bent, the key latch is the twist key on the big ATA rated cases. I always tape the keys down flat, because if the key gets opened up, it can get knocked off, and then you get to the other end and the key is missing. You can't unlatch the case, so that's a problem. The other thing I want to mention is traveling. I didn't see a question like this in the upcoming questions. Is about traveling with wireless gear, which is always check the frequencies. If you're traveling to another country, check if you're taking wireless mics or walkie-talkies. There's a chance that they could be confiscated at the border, because those frequencies that those things operate on are illegal in the country that you're flying into, or you're going to have problems. So if it's not on 2.4 gigahertz or 5 gigahertz, make sure they're on traveling frequencies for wireless mics. There are certain frequencies, and you can get that list of frequencies from the wireless mic manufacturer.
Okay, go, Jeffrey.
Yeah, especially in London, you could cross the street and then that wireless microphone is useless, because you'll get in trouble for that. My setup is not as not like Alex's, bottom line. But so what I do, a lot of travel, because we go to enterprise events and things like that, and do these smaller type streaming and recording type events. So for me, a lot of things is traveling. I'll get up to 150 pounds worth of gear, and I always like to take the pictures of it and saying, you travel with a small little case, I travel with 150 pounds with me, and that includes a couple Pelican cases, it includes my suitcase, and then of course the carry-on itself. Now the things that I do with it is, with my Pelican case, I don't do the bit by bit spreadsheet, but I do take pictures in my cases to see what's in there, and so I can prove what's in there, of course, going from there. So everything gets photoed and cataloged that way. If I go more than 150, since it's usually just me doing that stuff, yeah, I will do FedEx over that, because you have to account how are you going to get it outside the airport, and sometimes those carts just don't work. And then what type of transportation? If you have something prearranged like the van, that makes perfect sense. But for me, I remember one time we were in Tel Aviv and I watched my Pelican case get slung onto the top of one of those little taxis, and then a piece of rope was holding it down, and it just freaked the heck out of me. So I pretty much try to limit it, and then wherever I can ship it, I do. The other thing, locks versus zip ties. If I'm flying, a lot of times I will zip tie my Pelicans together. If I'm FedExing, I will throw some locks, some TSA approved locks that they can get into from there. And the biggest thing is I haven't done it yet. I'm really excited to actually start using Apple tags in all of my cases. And I might even throw in a phone, like an iPhone, even if it's turned off. If somebody goes into the case, they open it up, they'll see the face of the phone. The first thing they'll do is they'll turn it on. Well, they could take it. That's very possible. But if I have thousands of dollars worth of gear and that Apple tag is not being pinged by all the millions of phones out there, at least one iPhone might get a chance to actually ping it and find out where that bag ended up. So those, like I said, that's something to I'm thinking about for future travel if I have a lot of really expensive gear that I do. But that's what I travel with, is usually about 3 cases. So for me, Delta works. But hey, if you want to give me my ticket to anywhere, Alex, I'll go United.
Yeah, we just found that United is it's $50 a bag, anything under 100 pounds domestically, and $75 a bag anywhere in the world. For under 100 pounds, not 70 pounds. And it's only if you have a press ID. And the thing that we learned after some research, we were like, where do you get the press ID? Turns out you print it. like we just printed them.
Yeah. And for me, it's I'm usually on a commuter plane, so that's tough. So anything, even carry-ons get tough to do because the baggage overhead. And then the other thing is that I already forgot it, so never mind.
The little trick that we use with we use zip ties all the time, because there was an article about TSA years ago in Washington, D.C., where the TSA agent was kind enough to take I think it was 9 keys that are available for TSA, and he opened them up and let the reporter take a picture of them. And once he did that, it was pretty much, there's no difference between TSA locks and zip ties at this point, because everyone can just they're little 2D keys. They're super simple and easy to replicate. So anybody who wants to do it now has a whole set of those keys. So the TSA locks are absolutely worthless at this point. We use zip ties, but one thing that we do is we always use colored zip ties, and typically like bright orange, bright yellow zip ties. And the reason we do that is because TSA and every country that opens your cases only have clear ones. And so the chances of them matching your zip ties is very low. And so I can look at a whole set of cases that come out on the thing, and I can tell you which ones got opened. And we immediately open those ones first to just see if they got broken. Because the number one thing that breaks gear, you think that all these things are going to break your hardware. The number one thing that breaks your hardware is TSA opening it and packing it badly on the way back in. That is literally after shipping thousands of cases, that's 95% is that. So, and the reason that's important is you have to think about when you pack it, not that you know how to unpack it, but literally one thing we talked about all the time is pack the case so that it's so clear that TSA, who's never seen the case and doesn't know anything about electronics, can take it out, look at it, and put it back in again correctly. And that's the thing that you have to do when you start thinking about it, is to assume they're going to open it and look at it and put it back together. And again, number one loss for us, and mostly monitors, is the key to the operation. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, this reminds me of just how much I literally never want to travel again.
The reason I'm telling you all these secrets now is because there's lots of things that we wouldn't tell anyone, but I am not doing that again.
Right.
I'm so past that.
Yeah, I used to travel with a whole lot less stuff. The bottom box that you see there is this case that's behind me on the floor. Mm-hmm. It's this Tenba case, and I gotta say, this case was awesome because even with an iMac, because I don't like editing on a laptop The minimum I'm going to do is a 27-inch. Even with the iMac in it, this thing was only 42 pounds.
Yeah.
And super durable. I've shipped this thing, traveled with this thing so many times. My other box was exactly 50 pounds. And if somebody tried to charge me too much, I'd say your scale is not it's not right. I know exactly what it's supposed to be. And then the other thing I wanted to show you, because you mentioned it, I actually caught this. This right here is my iMac case. And I was sitting on the plane waiting to get off, and I was like, oh, that's my box. So this thing plays. I'm like, okay, this is going to be interesting. Watch this shaved gorilla here. What's he going to do? He's looking for the handles. Like, it's got no handles. Boom. Ouch.
Yeah. No, and that's what we used to take videos of. Is just really understanding, like, so people understood, like, this is how they're going to, it's not their job. You know, like, their job is to move the cases.
I just have to put it on this cart.
They can't care because they have a job that they're moving thousands of bags. If they slowed down a little, we'd all miss our flights, and then we'd be mad about that. And so our job is to pack it well, and their job is to move it. It's a thankless job that they have.
There was another time years ago I had I want to say it's an 8600 or something. It was a tower. It was a Mac tower in a hard box. And I watched the guy grab the handles, lean back, and he didn't drop it like this guy did. He
just threw it
down as hard as he could. He was like, bam. He was just having a bad day or whatever. And when I got to my location, every card in that computer had popped out and had been bouncing around for thousands of miles.
One of the things we did learn is that was the hard part of having your logo, is that they definitely at San Francisco International knew who we were and did not like us. I talked to someone. I was talking to some guy. He's like, "Oh, you're the guys. You know, they bring 25 cases and they're all heavy and they're all like that. You know, it's a lot of work for them to do it. So we definitely thought through that."
The other thing I'll add is when you're dealing. One time I took 36 boxes to Puerto Rico, and when I jumped out of the lead van at the curb, and this is back when you could still kind of do curbside. The first thing I did is I had a bag of donuts. I said, "Who's in charge here?" I said, "Hey, Bob, this is for you and your guys. I know I'm going to be a pain in the ass. I got a whole bunch of boxes, but I got everything written down. Let's go. Let's check these things."
And that's why we tipped heavy. We gave things away. You just take care of the folks that are taking care of you, because you just don't. I mean, number one is it's fun to do. That's the number one reason to do it. And number two is that you never know when you're going to see them again. It might be tomorrow, or it might be next week, it might be whatever. And they'll remember you as the person who understood that they were a pain. Like when you're traveling, really understanding that you're being a pain in the neck, you're not normal, and that you go out of your way to take care of people around you. It really
that Puerto Rico
helps.
Trick with the 36 boxes. I followed the boxes into the building while the producer was paying the bill. And I had also pre-done all the math. I knew exactly what they could charge, worst case scenario. And it was, I think the number was something like, I don't know, $2,300. Worst case scenario, overweight, oversized, they could charge me $2,300. And when the guy goes, "That's going to be $1,100, I looked at the producer, I said, "Pay it and smile." And I followed the boxes in. And he comes sauntering in. He goes, "Hey, I gave that guy $20. You think that's okay?" And I just shook my head and I walked out to the curb and I said, "Hey, I'm sorry, the guy I work for is an idiot. 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 here."
Yeah, exactly.
So you don't take care of that. And he goes, "Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that." I go, "Yeah. I'm going to see when we get back."
I'm going to jump forward. One thing I wanted to show that I didn't show there, and then we're going to go forward to because we got questions stacking up, is this is the other piece that I meant to show. This is a carnet. This is the front page of a carnet. When you start moving things from country to country, you need one of these. So you want to start researching carnets, and if people have interest, they can ask questions in the future. If you want to talk about it now. But this is the front page of a carnet, and basically they need to put a seal on it that says it left the country, and then someone else is going to put a seal on it that says it entered the country. And the next, if I can get this thing to do what I expect it to, these are the tags. So what they do is they will fill these out like it came in, and there's basically what you're saying is when you're leaving a country, they say, I take a tag and I say a matching tag and I say it left the country with this gear. When it arrives, they take a tag and they say it arrived with this gear. When it goes back, it says it left with this gear, and they have another one that says it came back with this gear. And so the idea is that's how they're kind of creating a closed system to make that work. And what that looks like when you actually see it is you'll have this doesn't have anything, but you'll have a list of literally every piece of equipment and the serial numbers that are on them in this list that goes out with that carnet. Now it says no changes or additions, but a lot of people will cross stuff out. I never do. I'll never cross something out or write something in. Whatever's in the carnet is in the carnet. And don't ever change the boxes. Don't change the things. Don't make any changes, because it just makes it super easy to get in and out of a country if you have a carnet that works. I generally wouldn't put anything on the carnet that was less than like $500. You're supposed to, but I never did, because no one looks for that stuff. And the funny thing you'll find is that if you don't put it on the carnet, it's not like they're looking for things that aren't on the carnet. They just say, where is the thing on the carnet? And then they open it and you show it to them. But you can have lots of little things in there that aren't in the carnet, and they're not digging through it going, is this in the carnet? They go the other way around. So anyway, so that's something. The carnets are. I'm thinking if people put it in the suggestions for second hour, I mean, I could get Boomerang, who managed our carnets, to come in and talk to us about carnets, but that might be another logistic. But that's a whole second hour on its own. Next question.
Okay, this one comes in from TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He says, I'll be traveling by plane with some of my camera gear in May, looking for a recommendation on a regulation-sized carry-on to hold my gear. Pelican, Think Tank, Photo, others?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I don't do Pelicans when that's carry on, and the reason why is because, first of all, Pelicans add weight. So if you got like a 50-pound limit, that first 20 pounds are going to be your Pelican case. Simple as that. The other thing is, I also go through, like I said, I also use a commuter plane to get to like Minneapolis Airport to get to my destination a lot of the time. So putting it on the overhead is almost impossible. There is one space, I believe, in some of these commuter planes that you can definitely get to put your case into if it doesn't fit on the overhead, but it's very limited from there. There is one case that I did get. It's the SKB component rack, which because I've been going away from laptops and doing desktops with better video cards for any type of streaming. Now for camera, what I did was I got a camera case, a camera bag. And I first of all got a bag that the camera fits in that's fully padded. So even if that bag doesn't fit in there, at least I can pull that camera out and put it at my feet if I need to. But then I have it inside the camera case that's all segmented through those walls with the Velcro on it, and bring it that way. That way it'll fit in the overhead if I need it to, and if I need to throw it on my feet, I can do the same thing.
Go ahead, Chris.
I definitely would use the Pelican. The 1510 is what you want, TJ. It's carry-on. It's awesome. We have a whole, but actually we standardize on packing. If it'll fit in a 1510, we pack everything in 1510s. They're not 20 pounds, they're about 13 and a half pounds. And the Pelican 1510 Air, I think it's actually the 1535, is actually just under 10 pounds. And if it is your carry-on and you don't have to give it to the gorillas, it'll be fine.
Yeah, in general, I do the Pelican Air. I've had tons. I mean, I use 1510s for a decade, as my carry-on. And literally, I would tell folks that work for me, you get a backpack. You don't get anything to carry on except for a book. Like I own your backpack and I own your 1510. We're gonna pack that for you. We will pack it for you and we'll hand it to you, and that's what you're gonna take, because that was usually gear that we didn't want to check. It was the laptops, it was the the lenses, the stuff like that, and you're gonna do that, and you're gonna put all your stuff in and check your bag. You can check some luggage, but we were pretty unforgiving about that because we just needed to be able to move that. We needed people's expectations to be what they are. We moved to the Airs, but I found that when I do international travel, I moved to the away bags because they are super light. And the battery thing was a disaster because I got the original away bags that you actually had to unscrew to pull the battery out. The new ones just pop out. But when they had all those battery problems, it became a problem. Without the battery, it is crazy light, and it looks just like a regular bag, to Jeffrey's point. Because like you would land in Germany, especially Lufthansa, those guys, I will not fly with them by choice. They will, even if you passed okay in the United States, they would, the Lufthansa guys would weigh it again in Germany. because it was a Pelican case. Like a Pelican case to them says gear and might be heavy. And I admit that we had a way of doing things. It was my own fault. We had a tendency to empty our case and get it our carry-on and get it weighed. Not empty it, but empty it some of the way and get it weighed and then put everything back into it. If you have a pair of people at an airport, you can one person goes in, gets their bag weighed for the carry-on, and then goes out and puts everything back in it, and then just because the only time they weigh it is when you're checking in. And so we would do that, and then we would get caught by Lufthansa. We didn't like that. So anyway, we use regular bags because they leave you alone. Next question.
All right, this one comes in from Matt Cool in Montreal. Sorry, I got to move my window now that the big thing came up.
Has anyone been successful at getting the infamous media pass for the airline travel? Yeah, so the infamous media pass is this media pass that basically for different airlines, there's different sets of rules where it can be 75 instead of paying a lot of money and especially lots of extra bag costs. If you're media, they know that you're having to do that, and what they don't want is media complaining about them. So I think that's one of the big reasons that they produced it, and it got a lot of people to standardize on a specific airline. I have a strong opinion that United is the best at it. They are the least tweaky about it, so they complain the least amount about it. They will give you the benefit of the doubt. They will charge you 50 bags domestic, 75 at least in my distant past, a couple of years after COVID, I don't know, but this is what it was: $5 a bag internationally, up to 100 pounds, which we used to call 100-pound cases. Really are painful. Anyway, but we would pack things up to 100 pounds for servers and stuff like that. And we could do up to 25 bags per person. So we've checked 40 bags for a couple people to get to somewhere, and so. The media pass, you think that the media pass is something you have to get. It's just something we printed. Now, what we did to make sure that what will reduce the amount of friction you get at the airport is one that is printed from a real card printer. We were saving, our calculation was somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000 a month on the media pass. And so it was like a big business for us. And so we had like a $2,000 card printer. The only job for that $2,000 card printer was to print media passes. But what it did is it had a holographic strip. We had a picture. We just looked at media passes or other people's ID passes and made them look as official as possible. And we found that we had no friction. I will say that if you try to use it with regular bags and not Pelican cases, you will get a lot of friction. I mean, you can't just go using a media pass. What made it work was it was obvious that we were media, and it was obvious of what we had in there. And then we showed them a media pass, and they were fine with it. And again, remember that you can still use your frequent flyer status to get the ones under 70 pounds. You don't have to use media pass for that. So we would keep a lot of our bags at 69 pounds so that we could get them all through on status. And then we would use the media pass mostly for the ones that are over 70 pounds, and ones that were over the count that we had for us. It is. If you're doing a lot of it, it's the key to the operation. I don't know anybody that did it as much as we did. Like to check 40 bags, was something that probably we were manipulating the system. We probably ruined it for everybody at some point, like I am now by telling you how it all works on YouTube. Next question.
All right, this one comes in from Matt Cool in Montreal, Quebec. It says, can you get a carnet for all of your gear or just what you think you might travel with?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
That's not the question that I raised my hand for. Sorry.
So for carnets, you get it. We used to get it for every trip that we sent out. We didn't do a carnet for all the gear. You usually want it to be in a group. Like this is the group that I'm taking out, because the way a carnet is actually designed is that you could use it for a year. You could have a carnet and it is the thing, because it's not really designed for us to be constantly changing your kit. The idea is I have a kit and I have a carnet for that kit. And I come and go with that kit. If you're constantly changing stuff, the carnet won't work. So you really need to have it. And what we just did is it's part of our cost. So every time we built a kit, we knew that there was a $500 or $750 cost on top of that was going to be managing the carnet, to get things in and out. Now, in smaller groups of I got a handful of bags, or in non-carnet countries, which are like countries like Ecuador and Brazil and Italy for a long time. If they're non-carnet countries, then we would at that point, we would tend to shift to civilian bags and quote unquote smuggle them in, which is that we wouldn't necessarily go through customs or anything else. We would just take them in, take them out. But as soon as you get to more than 3 or 4 bags, you can't do that. So for carnets, we would you definitely want to build the carnet for the given trip and just make it part of the cost. If you have a set kit that you're always going in and out of the country with, or you're going from country to country to country, you can have one carnet that you use all year, and they'll just keep on taking the tabs out of it. But you can't change if you're constantly adding and subtracting. I mean, people will tell you that it can, like technically you can write things in and white them out and scratch them off, but that's a invitation for all of your stuff to be checked at customs, and it's super uncomfortable and takes hours. Not that it's ever happened to me. So anyway, next question.
This comes in from Douglas Carmichael. He says, Alex, you mentioned a ZoomTX appliance would need to have SDI I/O for the broadcast market. Wouldn't it be easier to find Cat 5 or 6 cables in a strange city on short notice rather than SDI cables?
Yeah, but still, you have to build into the market that exists right now. And the number one market for there is SDI. NDI is still something that's kind of a specialized case. Next question.
Comes in from Matt Cool in Montreal. It says, Alex, how do you deal with the carpet and seat tabs on the floor of your minivan when loading cases?
It's a good question. We destroyed a couple of vans. So the best minivan, by the way, is the Caravan, because all the seats will fold into the floor. So the Caravan lets you fold all the seats into the floor, but it leaves little lips that can get pulled up. And so for some of our Caravans, number one, if we knew that that's all we were going to use them for, we just put a metal plate in it and we didn't bother with the seats. But if you want to keep on using the seats, at that point we would use, we got plastic with the little grippers on it, and we lay the plastic down all the way across. It does 2 things. One is it protects the floor. And the second is that it's much easier to slide the cases back. The biggest problem with the carpet is, sure, you're damaging the carpet, but the biggest problem is pushing heavy cases across it is a pain in the neck. So anyway, we that's also why, by the way, a small tip is if you're putting them into a Caravan, the wheels go first. So you can roll it, you can hold it up and roll it back down and then set it down, as opposed to, we put them on the racks upside down, but we put them on right side up with the wheels first, so that we can always pull them in and out. The other thing nice about the Caravan is you can side load. You can load things into the sides and load things into the back, and so it was a useful thing there. But yeah, putting the kind of plastic that you would see at the back of you can get long strips of rolls of it, but it's the kind of stuff you put under your seat, under your chair at a desk. It's got that thick plastic with some little grippers in it, but you can buy rolls of it from Uline, and we would run it. And it was just something we had in the warehouse, and you just drop it down and then you're off to the races. And sometimes, in a pinch, you use moving blankets, but they just move all over the place, or cardboard. So those are other things that you can use to back it up. But I would recommend it from the get-go. As someone who didn't do that from the get-go, I'd recommend doing it the first time you do it and every time after that. Again, worst case scenarios, go to U-Haul and buy a bunch of boxes, cut them open with box cutters and tape them together and set them down on top of it. That's something you can do relatively quickly and it'll work. Next question.
This one comes in from Wilson Spyro.
This is L.
L Wilson Spyro in Berlin. It says, when and if TSA is responsible for your equipment getting broken, is there a claims process?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, there's a claims process. There's also a claims process for if your regular luggage gets broken and stuff gets leaked out. But the biggest thing is you got to also be able to prove that luggage was in its somewhat pristine condition going in. So that's why I take a lot of pictures, because even if you have a bad wheel on your luggage, they might say that they won't be able to cover that. So insurance is the other key right there.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I always travel with additional insurance because the airlines usually will only cover up to $750 per bag if they lose it completely. So damage, you have to file a claim for it, and they will reimburse you. But and I don't know if the TSA is responsible for that. I think TSA, since it's a kind of government agency, I think you'd be hard-pressed to get a reimbursement from TSA, but usually the airlines will cover that kind of stuff, or if you carry additional insurance. Sometimes you can put it, check your credit card if American Express has, if you have a gold card or platinum card, a lot of times they'll have additional insurance that will cover your baggage and or anything checked with the TSA and for replacement value.
Yeah, we almost never. I mean, we tried once to get something back that got broken, and after that, it was so much labor. It was worth more than the device that was broken. And that was so for us, we just stopped worrying about it. We would, we're charging our clients for the use of our equipment, and we considered loss and breakage as part of that rental agreement. And that was just part of the cost of doing business. And so we just, I mean, I know that not everybody can do that, but for us, it was just something we just wrote off. And if it was broken, it would just get, recycled, torn apart, used for parts, whatever. But we very rarely went back and tried to get money for it. Next question. If it was expensive, we just get our insurance. We had, $2 million of loss insurance, and we get our insurance to cover it. But I don't even know. We maybe made one claim ever. Usually it was just cost of production. Next question.
And it's another insurance question from Thomas Bauer. He says, when sending equipment, at what point do people choose between carrier insurance, third-party insurance, or self-insure?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what if you mean self-insure, like you're going to pay for it, that's the third-party insurance. We carried a lot of insurance because it's required for us. We can't get into certain venues and so on and so forth without a certain amount of loss insurance. So we would have $2 million of insurance to just cover us for that piece. Whenever we can get the carrier insurance, we will typically take it because, in small amounts, like if it's just a little bit of whatever as a personal. As a company, because I had so much insurance, I didn't bother with the carrier insurance. The advantage of the carrier insurance is that you can oftentimes get them to pay for it and doesn't go on your insurance and doesn't increase your rates. The problem with it is if they know that you have insurance, they're going to fight that they want your insurance to pay for it instead of their insurance. And that's when you go back and forth. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I used to carry insurance on all my sound gear with my own insurance company with an inland marine policy, which is what they call it for covering gear. And the problem is, every year the prices would go up on the insurance, and the deductions would go up, and the exclusions would go. If it's stolen from a vehicle, we don't cover it. If it's stolen in the hands of a carrier, we don't cover it. So I just got to where I wasn't even buying insurance and would just cover the cost of the equipment. If it was, I put a slush fund together of the amount I would pay for insurance every year. And if anything was lost or stolen, I'd pay for it out of that slush fund and not worry about it, because I'd end up paying a lot for insurance. And if you ever made a claim, half the time they wouldn't cover it.
Yeah, and again, we carried insurance because we had to, because you can't run the events. Our calculation is that the percentage of revenue that we were making from our equipment, just equipment alone, each year was between $1.5 and $2 million. When we were running Pixel Core. And so it was a lot of money. And that was on equipment that we largely owned. So it was a big part of our revenue stream. And so we just felt like and I think that we never spent more than maybe in losses, probably not more than $50,000 a year in losses. And that was a bad year. Usually it was $10,000 to $15,000, $20,000 of losses a year. And you're talking about moving hundreds of cases, sometimes a week. So, if you pack it, it really comes down to packing it well. There are certain things that we did. So we packed things well, not always, but most of the time. We were very careful about this whole process of getting them in and checking them and getting them out, or working with a known carrier like Rocket. The other thing is that we did certain things like layovers. Never did a layover more than 5 hours or less than 2 hours. So the layovers were, not never, but almost never. Over 5 hours, they're sitting somewhere for a long period of time. People have time to noodle with them. Under 2 hours, that they'll miss their flight. Oftentimes. So we would kind of get into this. Try to sit in those windows when we were trying to figure out what the thing was. We also picked certain countries, like in Dubai, they will cut your hands off for stealing. And so we went through Dubai a lot because we were not worried about anybody. Like those could sit for days and no one's going to take anything out of those cases. There's nothing there worth it. So those are the kind of things we would take into account when we were figuring out what to connect through. Next question.
Comes in from Douglas Carmichael. And he says, what have your experiences been with traveling with SKB cases? I've heard that ATA cases, or anvil style, can be more durable for air travel.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
No, for checked luggage, I've never done an SKB. I do, like I said before, I have the carry-on, which is the SKB. It's a 2U rack. You can put a laptop on top. It's meant for DJs. And modded it for a custom computer so I could have a better stream, and then of course the laptop would do a lot of the control there. With those, they also were probably, I think they were the first set that I ever saw that actually had TSA locks attached to it and meant for air travel.
Yeah, and go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, SKB, if you're going to travel with it as luggage, because it's much lighter. With anvil type cases, ATA rate cases, which are usually, 1/2-inch plywood laminated with fiberglass and steel corners and everything, they're so heavy that the 75-pound limit on checked luggage is going to, they won't accept it, and they'll leave it off. You'll have to ship it air freight anyway. So if you have stuff packed in ATA cases, always ship it air freight ahead of time. And don't use it as carry-on.
Yeah, we would put those in trucks or some kind of freight support. Next question.
Okay, coming in from Tom Tomchak in Chicago. He says, have you ever pre-shipped your gear instead of trying to take it on a flight? Something we just talked about. For example, pallet wrap everything and ship it FedEx ground a few weeks before the gig.
I go with Jeffrey.
So when we used to do the CES live stream, it was with Todd Cochran from Blueberry, and he actually had to ship it from Hawaii, a lot of his gear from Hawaii. But there were many times that we were heading to the FedEx facility to get that gear, because once again, if you're one person, you only have so many hands to carry bags, and even if you can get the little carts to go into to wherever you're going to be driving to your hotel, you still have to find a way to get out of there. So that it's just a lot easier in some cases to do that. So yeah, we've done that several times.
We had our own trucks, so if we had the time, we'd have someone truck it from the, we'd either hire somebody in the United States. We had our own 18-foot truck that we put in those vans that I showed you the inside of the van. So we had 2 of those vans and then an 18-foot truck. Box truck that we would use, for those things. And so those were how we got things back and forth. So absolutely got ahead of it for things international, as you saw. For once we get into a bigger event, we would definitely move to shipping it. We wouldn't ship small things if we thought, because we were so good at checking, we would typically, if we could fit it into Pelican cases, we often would, because the demand and the cycle, we're going so fast that it was really hard. We're renting equipment. We can't charge the client for 3 weeks of equipment that's only being used for 4 days. So it means that if I put it on something that takes 3 weeks to get there or 2 weeks to get there, it means that I'm not making money on it, And so that was oftentimes why we would do things on shorter terms, was because if I put it in a case and set it for 2 weeks, I'd have to buy more of it to do some other job. So that was always a lot of our calculations with a lot of those pieces. Next question.
This one comes in from Douglas Carmichael. He says, for larger pieces of equipment like a Digico SD series consoles, would it make more sense to rent them locally and not go through the hassle and expense of shipping them by air?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I don't know. With a console is a pretty specific thing, and you like to have it set up for you, and so traveling bands and so on would probably go ahead and ship the console rather than to deal with the availability and wherever they're flying to. And a lot of times if they're doing a country tour or they're doing a tour, they will ship it overseas and then truck it from the location back.
Yeah. A lot of these get put in containers and other things like that. It's not necessarily putting on a plane. They're going to get put in something that's going to kind of manage that process. Next question. I think this might have been for the first hour, but we can go ahead and address it.
Okay. From Harshit in Central Florida, he says, what's the point of buying the specific Mogami cable that's $60 plus for a RCA to 3.5? And what's the point? B&H sells similar products, but a different brand.
Mogami cables are, in a pinch, they're much higher. They are better connections. And I've never bought a 3.5-inch one. I think if I was buying unbalanced, I wouldn't bother with the Mogami cables. You're already kind of not getting a great connection. We have bought Mogami cables for, because we didn't have time to make them, or we couldn't get them shipped in from a valid person. So if you're if you need high quality cables for a big event and you're going into Guitar Center, Mogami cables are what you buy, because everything else is really bad. like that they have there. And so it just guarantees it. It's super expensive, to your point. They are high quality cables. It's not like they're worthless cables. They're high quality cables, and they're just really marked up. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, durability is the main reason, because if you're going to use it for 1 or 2 times, then you could use the cheap Chinese cables. But as long as they work out of the package. But the failure rate after bending cables and plugging them and unplugging them several times, the Mogami is going to hold up much longer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Last question for the hour.
Last question from Douglas Carmichael. He says, how would you handle temporary storage of equipment and crew needs if the country you are entering requires a quarantine period on entry?
We haven't had to deal with the quarantine issue, but we definitely have to deal with storage, and you are working on that. Like that is part of the logistics of, it could be someone that you're, oftentimes we have a local fixer for larger events that is someone who we work with in a local city. And you can find, this is one of those things that's kind of like in the community. You ask someone who knows somebody, and they go, oh, I know the right person for it. Like I know that I happen to know the right fixer for Ecuador. And he works. And it was one of the things I talked to someone in the film industry that I knew. Have you ever done anything in Ecuador? And I go, oh, this is the guy. And it was like one of those things, like Ecuador is a non-carnet country, is a good example. And this guy, my brother had to fly in, and he had a bunch of gear, and we were shooting at on the coast. And you have to do this really weird thing with Ecuador, which is you send some kind of an invoice that lists your gear. It's kind of like a carnet, but not a carnet. And I was terrified that we weren't going to get in. And I tried to follow all the rules. And I talked to I talked to my fixer there, and he's like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We'll sort it out. And paid him, he was expensive. I asked my brother when he got in there. He goes, how did it go? And he goes, I don't know. He goes, I got off the plane, and then we went to a bar in the airport, and then we got in a car and drove away with all the stuff. And he's like, I don't really know what happened. And I was like, yeah, I don't think we're going to ask. So the fixers are, a lot of times they just do whatever needs to get done to get your stuff done. And they have all the connections, and but they'll know where to ship things and warehouses to keep it in and everything else if they're good at what they do. And a lot of them on a day-to-day basis, they're producers in the country. So they're like the guy that I work with, when I go to Rome, and he just produces lots of videos, and he knows lots of people, and he has a whole crew. And for international companies that come in, he's a fixer. So it's not like that's what he does. It's what he does for me, And so anyway, if you need someone, Dario is the person that you need in Rome. Just let you know. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and if I don't know about the quarantine for pandemic issues, but if you don't have a carnet and you're traveling with a large amount of equipment, what they can do is when you get to a country, they will try and charge you import duties on that equipment. If you're traveling with several $100,000 worth of Panavision gear, that could amount to $35,000 or so that you have to come up with in cash. So
not that it's ever happened to you.
Of storing your equipment for you
for a long time,
confiscating it, yes, until you come up with that import duty. So
the government of Rwanda was kind enough to keep our drone for 6 months. So as someone figured out who was going to let us have a drone in the country, and then it came back to me. Anyway, so yeah, there you go. Anyway, hopefully that was useful, or at least entertaining. But getting stuff in and out of places is a thing. We could probably talk about it I think we'll probably end up talking about once a year. I keep on thinking we're going to get close to where people are going to ship things again, but then I go, oh, I don't know. I don't know if that's going to keep happening. All right. Well, thanks to our producers for a lot of great questions, and thanks to our panelists for all the great answers. And now we're going to